Okay, guys, Sam back with you here on Tuesday, November 6th, and we're going to wrap up here. So as we're doing traditionals now, Tuesdays and Thursdays, by request, of course, we poll the members, we let them pick these. So this is the pound of the dollar. Now, there's some interesting things here. Now, I always like to start on the daily here when we're looking at currencies, just to reinforce and remind you that you really... Boy, you know, I rarely trade any FX that below a 4-hour time frame. It's just you will find that these trends are so strong and they're so long that you really want to try and get yourself positioned into one of these moves. That I mean, these are the 14. That's a 3-year downtrend here. So here was 2-year uptrend. These are major moves, but you really... They're so technical on the daily that these are the areas you really want to be looking for entry. Now, sure, we can go down to smaller time frames when we're trying to qualify a count. But for the larger degree of where you want to look for position and larger swing trading, you really want to look long term. So I would encourage you to stay 4-hour daily, even 3-day, to really get a big picture. And then if you can get position in one of these turns, then the challenge becomes staying with it. If you get a move like that, or a move like that, or a move like that, right? Very, very hard to stay with that through the retracement. But that said, so let's look in here. So here's my daily chart. All right, so some sort of a 5-wave structure here, or it very well could be an ABC, and we've got the 5 coming from this pivot down. Oh, you know, so we look here and we go, shit, okay, why do we stop there? So first thing, of course, you'd look from the swing high. We'd certainly go dominant high to dominant low, and you think, all right, well, front run on the 50, that's a pretty good front run there. So that's, you know, that's pretty meaty. That's 2 full points. So maybe. Of course, you'd want to check all of these here. So we have a major pivot here, and you go to that. Get that right on there, and now you go, okay, now I know why it stopped there, right? So swing high, swing low, right to a 618. All right, so we have small pause at the 50. You can see here you had some structure there that gave this little bit of a hesitation here, but then we go up and we get the 618 to the tick, and then that's the reaction, right? It's always easy in hindsight. So here's the big target down here. Oh, now we go in there. It's you'd certainly want to be aware of that, right? If we're going to break some of these, and we're going to get into this here on the right edge here, but we break some of these levels here. I promise you, there's software that sold it there that's not going to get out. So one of 2 things happen: it's going to get stopped out at 65, or it's going to stay short until it gets that target. That's a long way down. So, all right, let's dig in here. But that's significant pivot, right? That's what we identify here. So we have a technical pivot as to where we go next. Well, you certainly would want to know that target was down there. So let's go from daily. Let's go to our 4-hour. Now this was a rather tricky count coming through here. So, you know, this is a question of whether you want to be a disciplined Elliott trader and stick to the rule set, or whether you want to fuck, all right, a little fudging here and there, you know, we'll get the basic drift of it. Well, you know, that's up to the individual. I would tell you that more often than not, if you're fudging a count to make it fit your perspective, that's going to come back and to bite you in the ass. So I would be cautious about doing that here and try and get a count that fits through the rule set that we don't disqualify. Now, we had a couple of little conundrums here. This area here made it for a very difficult count to dig out of here. Now, it starts with this area down here. What I actually think we get down here is a double bottom here, because it's tempting to want to go, 1, 2. But I actually don't think that's what we get here, because we had this you know, is it aberrant? You know, you had this wick down here. So you wouldn't want to start your count here, because this we go up and then we come down again. So this is not a 1, 2. What I think happens here is that this is still remains corrective, and then we don't get resolution. So if we go here, all right, so 50 reaction, can't get to the 618. We don't get target here again. Reaction at the 50. Now we break, and that. So what I think is the actual low here. Now this. I could be a victim of what I just advised you here. I think this is because I finish in 5. I think that we double bottom down here, and that while we don't get a new low here, just this one bar where we had this extreme behavior, I think we finish down here with a truncation or a double bottom here. Technically, you call that a double bottom. That seems to work best in terms of coming out of the count. So if that's our low and this is our 1, this plays as our 2, well, then we got a little conundrum here. So if you're wicking off the 1s, here's the real trouble spot is right here. So if that's the 1 coming off of that low, you see the overlap here. That's problematic because we need if this is 1, 2, we need an impulse here, because the assumption is we are not, as we continue on, we're not in a diagonal, as we don't have any other overlap here. So you got a bit of a conundrum there, right? So it's a much easier count to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into the 1. Just doesn't play. It doesn't work here. This is enough of an overlap here on a 4-hour that I can't fudge that. So if let me open this up here so we can see this a little better. So if this is my 1 and this is my ABC into my 2, so ABC into my 2, well then I have to go 1, 2 here. So I have to go 1, 2 to give this the 3, the 4, so that we don't overlap the 1 here. See how we do that? Right, just barely qualifies. So I got to have a big ABC here. So this does play. I know that's small. It's hard to see that. So you'd have to go 1, 2 up for the 3, ABC into the 4, be spared the overlap. Now we do overlap here, but that's only relevant to this 4 here. So from this 2, I need an impulse to get into my 3rd. If I've got that correctly identified as 1, 2, I got to have an impulse here. That's the only way I can get that to work. So this, I know that's a very small, but so we'd have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't threaten this 1. So the problem was here. This was problematic in terms of getting a count that's consistent with the rule set. So here's the bigger one here. So wicking those off, always a good idea. So that'll force you to rethink and say, well, what if I can't have that, where else can I make that work? Where else can that fit? So ultimately, we do get a good 3 up here off of this 3, 4, and then you can see the clear 5 into that 3. So we do get a count that works here. So let me pull back out here. All right, so 3, here's our 4, and then we get this nice, and we double top here. Interesting, all right, we have a double bottom on the low. I'm proposing that's a double bottom. We go into a double top here, slightly extending here. So we end up with an ABC into this 4, and as I recall from this 2, because I trade this a lot. Right here, we're right to the 618, and then but we don't get target. Don't get target. All right, so just because they're there, I like to remind you, just because they're there doesn't mean they must be realized. But we've got a technical 4. We don't overlap the 1. We go up and double top. All right, it happens. We don't get target. Well, look at the reaction coming down. All right, that's. Well, you certainly wouldn't call that corrective. That's just a straight moonshot. That's straight down, right? So maybe center of the earth shot, right? Not to the moon. That's we're just going straight down. That is a massive reaction, right? So how we come down here now. Interestingly, where do we find support? Right, those prior pivots. That's why it's always helpful to wick those off here. They have a way of coming back into play. Right, and we come right back to it. Here's to the tick. Now, I don't think it's reasonable to call this some sort of an ABC and we'd be completed going into a 1-2. I think this is on a larger degree likely to be our A wave. So from that, we're just a straight shot down into an A. Now, I do get a little ABC here, but I think what's more likely is some sort of a flat correction because of the length of this A. I don't think this would be A into a B wave, and then we're going down into the C. It just doesn't look it doesn't fit, right? So the symmetry would be all wrong. So what I think is more likely is that we're going to have some sort of a flat correction here. Now there's a, we'll look right there. So if we're going to go A, B, so we'd have to go A, B, C into the B, then we'd finish the C of the B of the larger degree. So in the larger degree, we'd be playing for A, B, and then down for the C. I think that's more likely here. I get that double clicked here, and then we'll take it off. So come here. Let's get that off. So I think this is more probable, right? This could be maybe there's a diagonal, but I think that's less likely. So of course, just swing high, just basic stuff here. Swing high to swing low. Well, here's our 50 right here. So that's reasonable if we're going to get a flat That's not unreasonable to come right into the 50. That would give us our potential B wave relative to this swing, right? So this would be, is it possible that that's our B wave? Yeah, it's possible. But is it probable? Not likely. I think much more likely is we come up here, we put in that B since we're getting pretty good traction after that low, and then we're coming down. Here's our algo target that would complete that, so we'd get an ABC with this as our target. So if you step back on that, oh, see, can I pull out? I have to do it. Let's go to an 8 hour and see how that would fit with where we are. Well, if this is a completed impulse here of some sort, well, we'd be correcting down here. You know, it's tricky in here, right? So we have all of this. So if I'm working from my low, if I were to do that, where is this putting me? Well, even 887, I think, is getting challenged there. Well, so that's interesting. So last stand, I mean the last stand for an internal retracement would be the 887. So note the 887 is on top of the 23.6. So it's, you know, you're pushing here to call this, if you were trying in the largest of degrees to call this a 1 and this a 2. Well, that's about as far as you can give that. So if we were going to go up to something substantial here, go intermediate so we can see it, and then we go back out to the daily. Does that make sense? I mean, it could, right? It's deep for a retracement, so the assumption would be that you'd be trading this, that this was corrective, that this was just a giant ABC, since I think we double bottom there. So let's go stay on that same scale. Well, that works. Okay, so this would be ABC, and then we'd be going into a 1, 2 all the way down to the 887 if that's going to be realized. Now, again, just as here, just because it's there doesn't mean it must be realized. But thinking about where that could be sending us, I'm going to get that right back on that pivot. I'm going to use the truncated low because I think that is our low. So if we're going to come in here, if we were going to do this, well, that's a deep 2, no question, right? And if we get that close, you know there's a big push to challenge those lows. But if we were going to get something like that, wow, is there some big upside here? If we know that, just in a shorthand, now it'd be a little bit lower here since we'd be going to the 887. So if we think about where that 1618 would be, if we were going back up there, that's, so now let's try and put the whole thing together from swing high to swing low. I'll use the absolute low. Well, interesting, right? So here's the 887 pushing up the other direction. Here's the biggie, but that's not going to be a third. So this is a bit of a conundrum, right? So that's very deep for a 2, yet there it is. So we got plenty of time here to let this resolve and see if we were going to come down here and challenge that. That would be very interesting. We're going to get down there. So it sets up just a massive move. Does that seem probable? Well, what does that tell you about where the dollar's going? So it's, you know, it's there. So technically it's there. So I think it's a danger to think, oh, well, wait a minute. If we're raising rates in the U.S., well, we've got this whole Brexit issue going on. You know, if you start to think about that macro view, I think that can ultimately lead you into some decisions that can be problematic, unless you're a long-term macro trader. But if you're here watching my video, you're looking for the technical solution, and the technical solution would suggest that there's more up right now until we test some of these retracement levels. We test those levels and we get a reaction there. We start to head lower. Well, we have a reasonable target. So this is a difficult currency to be trading right now. So, of course, as I like to remind you, if it's difficult and you can't get clarity, no shortage of choices in the FX market. But let's go back down here to this. Go to a 3 hour here and see. So if this is coming up as a C wave, right, as I'm suggesting, it looks more likely to me. If we're going as a C, well, then I'm looking for 5 in that C wave. So what do I have here? Well, if I go all the way down to a 1 hour, can I get something started here that looks decent? So let's clean this up a bit. I can take this off. So if that is my B wave here, let's open this whole thing up. Do I have a motive coming off of that? Well, it's kind of weird looking one wave, but we could make this case that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going in. Now that's Get that down to something more reasonable. Okay, so 1, 2. Well, I wick off that 1, just force of habit. That's an odd-looking 1, but if I go down to a smaller time frame, I can probably dig that out of there. So there's... I use that as the 1 as it's the only retracement that would give us a potential 50. So if this is my low, my high, well, look at that, right to golden zone. Unbelievable. Right to the golden zone. Right here's target. We're getting all the way to the 3rd. We're past that. So it looks like I can make a reasonable case here. So if I leave that on the 1, I'd want to check the wolf range. Come here. Interesting. So if this is my first pivot to work with to try and range the market, well, look here, we're coming up to 200% of that initial range. But look how we've reacted. Now we blow right through this. And that's, if we're gonna pivot here, if we were, so we get 1, then we get 1.5, damn near to the tick, back to the 100. Now we're pushing here. Kind of interesting. So if we get this up here, then I would put the new range on here if we're going to pivot here. Now we don't have a pivot yet, so we're just projecting. But if we're going to hold here at 200% and get the pivot there, then of course that would be a reasonable spot to draw the new range, and the anticipation would be we'd be coming back down to the 50, and then off we go to the new range. So that's one worth watching here. So what's the reaction like? Well, I don't know that I'd be doing a whole lot here in terms of new trades. One, partly because we're in the 5th here completing, so really not a time to be a buyer. Shorting that, based on what? So what are you shorting that off of? So even if you were first looking at this, and I was looking at this actually, let's go here. As we came to the golden zone here, but it just takes a tick through it, right? As we get through it now, right, not worth considering anymore for the short side. So now you're looking here going, okay, well, if I'm going to pivot up here, well, where am I likely to go? Well, so there's no reason to be a seller up here. We just, boy, straight up off the low. There's nothing technical there, so I'd be just waiting for the pivot. So there's nothing to be selling here. We don't want to be selling into that move. That's just no reason. The risk is too high. So what we'd want to do is let's let this do something like that. Then there's a potential buy there. But right now it's hurry up and wait. Let's get through the election results. You know you're going to have volatility in the currency markets, particularly if there's any sort of a surprise that you're going to see an extreme move, likely particularly first reflected in currencies, as they'll be going overnight. So I'd be cautious here, but I think there's some things setting up. This is extreme volatility as we see these internal retracements are getting pushed well beyond the golden zone. So when that's happening, that's likely telling you got to step out to larger time frames and then do your planning based off of that. So if this is A, B, and we're going into, if this is the C, right, all we have is just the one wave here. Right, if we're going up here, so you'd have to be considering something along these lines. If right, it's a big if this is the B and we're going into the one wave up here and we're going 2 and then we're going 3, 4, and 5 to give us that C, well, maybe we're going higher than the 50. Right, now again, this is all just conjecture as to what that might look like, but just putting something basic together. Yeah, there's an opportunity on the first retrace, no question, right? With nice double bottom here, we get a push up here. Eventually, we're going to get a pivot that first time down, that first 50 down, if it's right here. Oh, I guess I'm backwards there. Let's do it correctly. So if I get this pivot here, somewhere right here, there's your next opportunity. I sure be paying attention here. I'd want to be alerted when we come down. We're approaching that 50. Anything there? Well, you got some prior support there. Possibly, right? Ideally, you want support to turn into resistance, not support to show itself again. But just off of that 50, again, I don't know where the pivot is here. And then, of course, we'd be setting up. We'd have a deep. This is not ideal for median lines because of the depth of that. But it's there. I would still use it on the anticipation that we might go up towards some of those upper targets. So if you think about where could this be going, if this is going to keep going, well, we got a corner pocket here. And so where might you anticipate that pivot? Boom. right? So it's very sharp because of the depth of the retracement here. So that might be a logical place that we're going to come up here and tag this if this pivots here, and then we'd come down and then go again. Then that's a reasonable target. If this is going to trade as a 1-2, then back to the median line would be absolutely perfect. As a matter of fact, let's just scale it out. If we do something like that, right, then here's your 1-6-1-8. Now again, we don't know how far that goes. Right? If we go deep again, where would it be absolutely perfect? So what would that be in terms of this retracement? If we were to pivot there, that'd be putting us, well, we'd have this. So if we were going to get the perfect 6-1-8, that could be interesting. Somewhere in that range, if we're going to go all the way down here to the 7-8-6, which would not be uncommon, we come to this between the 6-1-8 and the 7-8-6, then that would put your 1-6-1-8, so then you'd have this hot box. Now this is all just, you lay out possible. It's just possible. I don't know where this pivot is. I don't know where this pivot is. But if I just lay it out in terms of what could, where's a scenario that would fit in terms of where we are? Well, if I have this properly identified as the A and the B, and we're going to do a flat retracement, well, I'm looking for 5, right? So if this is the 1, maybe 2, that would all fit. Right? So again, we don't know until we see where this pivot is. It's all just speculation, and it's a potential roadmap. But it serves you well to do that, so you get some sense of where the probable locations where you'd anticipate some sort of reaction. We've had this very clear ABC down to this double bottom here. We're coming off of it with a motive. Could be the 1, could be something else. All I know is I've got a motive that's going in. I got a target at the median line right here. I'd like to see that reaction. I do think the next trade is a buy. So if we get this reaction, we come down here, I sure would be looking. All right, guys, that gives you a lot to chew on there. It's going to be very interesting to see how things react when we look at this on Thursday after we've had, well, 48 hours from the results to see how that affected the currency markets. All right, guys, with that, I'll leave you and just remind you, give us a follow over on Twitter. It's a good way for us to communicate with our followers. We do the same thing on YouTube here, but a lot of people don't make it all the way to the end. So just want you to be aware we've got this trial program that we're setting up, so you'll be able to come in and trial the membership for a few days. We're not quite dialed in on it yet. You won't have full access, but you'll get more than you get from just the public Discord. All right, so look for that, and we'll be posting that on Twitter. All right, guys, with that, I'll call it a day.